Hi, welcome back to Dell's podcast. I'm studying a PhD at Liverpool Hope University. I'm sure you've been watching some of my PhD's kind of podcasts with the ADHD Foundation, with the Brain Charity, and it's in learning through creative arts for neurodivergent young people. And today I'm with a wonderful young man who has had some adversities through being neurodivergent. And I'd just like to have a day, half an hour podcast where we chat about your experience, Tim. So Tim, you've told me, of course, that you're neurodivergent. And for anyone watching or listening, can you break down the areas of your neurodivergent and what you have to deal with from day to day, from what age and how young you were?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you, Dad, for inviting me onto the podcast, and I hope listeners, viewers are going to find this a good episode amongst everything else. And it sounds like your PhD is going to be a wonderful piece of research that will hopefully not just benefit academia, but also people's lives as well. So my name is Tim. I'm glad you still think I'm a young person. I'm in my 30s, but that's cool.
Compared to me, I'm 60.
Yeah. So I was born, I like to say, I was born at the very back end of the 80s, which means 1990.
Yes.
But anyway, I was born in Yorkshire, and when I was 5 to 6 months old, I remember being sent to hospital quite a lot. But the reason for all of that was because I was having a lot of seizures. They were taking me on and off ventilators, amongst other things. What happened was the consultants and everything else, they diagnosed me that I had meningitis, encephalitis and pneumonia, which, a few things. What that meant was I was having difficulty with the brain and with responding and so on, and it led me to being severely sight impaired, which now means with one of my eyes, what most people can see 36 meters away with clear detail, viewing and clarity, I can only see the same thing with the same detail and clarity 6 meters away, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah,
yes.
But from this eye, what most people can see 60 meters away with clear detail and so on, I can only see the same thing 6 meters away. So that is to give you a bit of a perspective of what it's like for my eyes now. I've also got something that was called dyspraxia. It's now called developmental coordination delay, and basically that's to do with how your hands and your eyes work together and function together and talk to one another.
Yes.
So to give you listeners and viewers a bit of context, it took me about 14 years to learn how to tie shoelaces.
Wow.
It meant it took me a very long time to learn how to catch a tennis ball. Tracking small objects can be very difficult. I often stumble a lot and cause accidents. So there's something there. I also got diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome when I was 7, but I think it's just part of the autistic spectrum, so that's happened. And then I'm also epileptic, so I control epilepsy with medication. But if I'm in environments that's sort of really dark but big flashing lights, like a nightclub, or if it's just really bright sunlight, then I can faint from that. So that's just sort of a bit of the difficulties that I've had to learn to live with and to adapt since I was a child.
Oh, that's amazing. And I'm saying amazing in a bad way. It's amazing that you've learned, Tim, to circumnavigate with all of those areas that you're talking about. Usually someone just has one of those areas, like I'm just, ADHD. Some people might just have the dyspraxia, but you've got, I think from what I heard, four different elements that you've had to work with as a young child. So let's dig a bit deeper into how you've built coping mechanisms, the obstacles you faced in the school environment. Because for me, as I mentioned to you earlier, I found it very difficult to sit still in the classroom setting.
Of course.
I found it very difficult to concentrate for long periods of time.
Yeah.
And certain lessons I found it hard to engage in
Definitely.
if I weren't interested, and whether that's how a neurodivergent mind thinks. So for you, what is your memory like trying to fit into, or did they, your parents put you into specific learning school from
Yeah,
right
yeah.
from the
So
beginning?
I think nursery and very early years in primary school, those sort of years from year reception to year 6, I spent a lot of that time at a special needs school, and
Yes.
so they were equipped with specific TAs, who teaching assistants who are qualified to work with additional needs children, and also like specialist equipment, and you know, whilst I had my own needs, additional needs, there were some people who were far worse off or had very severe difficulties like cerebral palsy, and they really couldn't really communicate. They needed machines to do that. Some people couldn't control kidneys and bladders, and so they were making a mess everywhere, and you could see a trail down the corridor. So I feel like, yes, I've had my own issues and things to adapt to, and I've had help with that. Got to remember that other people do have their own difficulties. But yeah, so I was there for a while, and it was slow progress. I struggled with reading, of course. I think something that we noticed quite early on was there was, in my optic nerve, there's like a delay between what the eyes physically see and then how the brain will interpret and process what that actually is. So if I sort of move my body to try and look at one of our computer screens around the studio, if I look at that and it's small text, I have to move my posture to concentrate, and that gets really, really tiring, even after just a few seconds, as well as ruining posture. There's also, when you're trying to cross the road, I look and I think, oh, a car might be a certain distance away, but in real life it might actually be even closer. So I'm often sort of pegging it across the road, just hoping that I don't get knocked over, and my wife is praying every time that I cross the road just to make sure that I still have my limbs, legs and feet. And
just on that subject, do you have a dog or any aids, or are you just trying to live life as normal as?
Yeah, I mean, my parents tried very hard to sort of indoctrinate you with the idea of independency, and that you get on with life, you need to focus a lot on being as independent as you can. As if to say it's a shame to ask people to help you, but I think they probably meant it that you just want to get the best you can in this life. But I think as people, particularly as people who live in the UK, we're not very good at asking people for help. So yeah, there you go. But yeah, like crossing roads. It was actually last week or so. I had someone come round in Loughborough where we live to talk about guide dogs and things like that. And I'm not sure. Like I was sort of listening.
You seem to be doing.
We're looking at that. We're also looking at those sort of canes, those like sort of sticks. That can help you sort of tell people that you've got severe sight impairment and so on. So I might be able to do that. The problem with a guide dog is, as good as they are, I don't know if they'll be any fun. I mean, can you play football with a guide dog? Can you have water fights with a guide dog? I don't know. And if I wanted to take my family on a holiday to Rhodes or to Turkey and go paragliding, the guide dog has to be everywhere you go. And I thought they would not survive in 40+ degree heat, and I think, will they become more of a nuisance than an aid? And would people who are totally blind, as in they have no vision at all, would they benefit even more than I would from a guide dog? Because the demand and waiting list is very high.
It's good that you take consideration of other people. But you seem to be, and as I said, your parents have probably pushed you to be independent as possible.
And so coming back to school, so I was in primary school, and then what they tried to do was try and transition me into mainstream junior school from year 3 onwards. So when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I started going to junior school 1 day a week, then 2 days a week. When I was 9, I went 3 days a week, and then by the time I was 10, I went full time. So it was a 2-year transition period, and I had teaching assistants at the mainstream school too, and they helped me with reading, with writing, with dyspraxia, with DCD. Writing, it goes all over the place. You can't. Those lined paper that you would use and exercise books, they were useless. Yeah, so you can't keep it straight. No point asking me to draw shapes and stuff. It'll just like squiggles. But I had teaching assistants to help me with that. So that was really, really great. I think obviously at school, if you're only in the minority of having additional needs, of course, bullying is going to happen, sadly.
Of course.
But there were some people who were really good at playing football, and I enjoyed playing football, and so that was nice. And with the teaching assistants, I remember them coming in to school, and we were just about to get ready to do PE or something, and I really enjoyed that. They took me out of class and were about to take me to do touch typing lessons, and I got really annoyed because I felt they were trying to take me away from the little friends that I had and the little things that I enjoyed doing, which was like football and things like that. So
that's great.
I remember that being quite annoying, but never mind.
I want to now dig into what I'm really focused on in my PhD, which is the creative and performing arts. And looking at that. Now, I know you're very big into your music.
That's right.
We've talked about how that's played a major role in what you do, as well as being a pastor, of course. For anyone like watching again, explain to you about your passion in music, how it's helped you, what it's done for you, how you've learned, because you mentioned about how you've had to learn to play instruments and practice. So let's know.
So I mean, my parents always had music playing on at home. They would have these like big tape like machine things or like vinyl players, which I think they're starting to make a bit of a comeback now, aren't they?
But
we had them. But I started getting really interested in how the machines worked, and I started playing with them. But then my siblings and I think my mum and dad started getting a bit annoyed because I kept messing with the needle, and they thought I was going to damage their precious records, of course.
How old were you? Sorry.
I would have been probably 7.
Okay.
Approximately, give or take. So what they did for my birthday, they gave me my own personal vinyl player. And that was cool. I mean, if I kept it, it would have been a vintage treasure, could have made millions. So I got one of them. They gave me some things to play with tape. They also had these little sort of like toy keyboard things, because I enjoyed experimenting with sound. I remember them telling me that I used to go around the street opening and closing garden gates, sometimes really fast, sometimes really slow, because the pitch, the frequency of the sound of the squeaking sort of creaking gates, I found it really fascinating. So sound is made up of two main properties, one being pitch, which is measured in frequency from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz on average, and then the other thing is amplitude, which is volume in decibels. But the frequency I found really, really interesting. Why is this gate doing this noise, that's doing that note? And I tried to replicate it on the keyboard. I don't know how successful I was as an 8-year-old. My parents also noticed that I was really, it was during the days, in the 90s, Disney VCR was very, very popular, and I started trying to memorize bits of the songs from old Disney films, like the original Snow White, the original Jungle Book, and things like that, and trying to play it back. It was
on
all
keyboard,
on this all like Casio keyboard and stuff. It was all broken up into bits, and I had to keep going back and again and again.
Was you teaching yourself this?
Yeah, and I was just trying to learn it, and I eventually got to the point where I started playing from 101 Dalmatians, Cruella de Vil, and started really enjoying what I do. It was a bit more an audible tune than just pure banging noise. And so my parents decided to send me off to music therapy when I was in primary school. So once a week, I'll go after school. I'll go into the back of this really big van, and they had a piano, they had a drum kit, they had percussion instruments like shakers, tambourines, triangles, all kinds of cool stuff like xylophones, marimbas, and other bits and pieces, guitars, and I think over the course of a year and a half, 2 years, once a week after school, I'd spend an hour or an hour and a half doing these sort of music therapy stuff, and
That's amazing. Anyone
yeah.
listening, because I'm excited about this. You said music therapy.
Yeah.
So how was the music being therapeutic for you, Tim?
So, I mean, to me, I was just enjoying myself making a noise and hopefully not disturbing neighbours because it was in the back of a van. But I was enjoying myself, and I think the beauty is the therapist and the doctors who would come from time to time. They were musical and were able to play along, and they would join in. And so I did not take any notice that they were actually doing a lot of analysis and a lot of evaluation in terms of my progress in turning pure noise into a tune that is actually a bit more pleasant to listen to. So I think they will use music therapy to try and teach you how to how to recognize certain sounds, how to translate notes on a keyboard to the frequency spectrum, and what certain instruments do and where you'd use them. And of course, these will be for people who struggled with various additional needs, and for me it was being eyesight, having DCD and autism, I think, as well, because I think with concentration, I found that I'm one of those people who would, if I latch onto something, I will then want to find out everything about it, even if it's random.
I know a bit that, like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So I find that I was really interested in this symbol of that drum kit, so I'd really want to just study it really, really in depth and try every possible sound you could make from it. Same with the piano, or a keyboard. I thought, this keyboard it's got this and that button, it's got that slider, it's got that knob, it's got whatever it is, it makes that sound. And so I would really focus deeply on particular things, but zoom in into as much detail and be exhaustive with it. And I found that really energizing and enjoyable. And I think through music therapy, they were trying to help me capitalize and maximize my interest into not just music, but I think musical instruments and equipment.
Do you think that the music helped you in life, just in terms of how you learn? As you just said, did it play a major role in helping you? How can I say it? Like dance and singing and drama and creative arts really helped me, whereas when I was trying to learn through your standard way of learning. So did music help you in your methodology of
yeah, I think there were at least two things. One being I found that there was certain music that I really enjoyed listening to, especially soundtracks from films or video games. I also enjoyed some jazz and some things like that. And I like, when I was studying for exams or trying to concentrate on something in everyday life, I'd like to have that specific music because it helps with relaxation, to clear your mind, to clear your head, get some headspace, on to focus on what really matters at that time, and all kinds of, you don't need to be neurodivergent to do that sort of thing, but I think I found that came a very prominent and very routine for me. So it helped establish a routine of focus and of concentration and reflection as I was going through school, as I was trying to do the SATs at the end of year 6, and then later in year 9, then GCSE, A-levels and degree. And
now I want to jump into that because you mentioned the course of your autism being, as you said, partially blinded, dyspraxia. I know that I was having this conversation with some of my colleagues on I have a podcast about assessing young people at a young age, and if they have got a variety of different neurodivergent ways of learning, that should be assessed at a young age, and then if they do learn more through the creative arts, that they've given that opportunity. So for you, going through A levels and you said a degree, there's a standard way usually you have to write down your exams and sit an exam. Did they have to put certain things in place for you?
Yeah, they did. So especially when I got to GCSE and then particularly A level, the secondary school I was, I think as we got to know each other and certain TAs got to know me, what happened was GCSE, they basically gave me less TAs but with more time with them. And when with A level, I think I only had one or maximum 2 TAs, and I had all my time with them. And so they understood how I thought, how I processed information. They acted as scribes for me, so they could write what I would say rather than me trying to write with my own hands. They would read out the questions for me, so I didn't have to use my eyes and tire myself out. I would have 50% extra time, so sometimes 2-hour exams would be 3-hour exams and so on, and I could take breaks whenever I wanted because I'll be in a separate room to everyone else, and that was really was really helpful. So they were really good with that, and actually A level was where I did my best in education. I think it was the first year they introduced A star into A levels, like 2009 and 10, and that I was the only one who got A star in sixth form for music, and I got like stuff.
A round of applause for that, Mr. Tim.
Yeah.
A star, well done.
Yeah.
And continue. Sorry. Yeah.
And then and so then that was a mixture of composition. Exercises, performance, I did jazz piano and stuff, but also your written exam. But then also like music tech I did as well, because I was really into recording and production. I also did like IT, because I'm into computers. So can you see there's a kind of a 3 levels, but it's quite a narrow but deep concentration and focus, which I decided to put my efforts into, and media studies as well. I remember taking not the camera that you're using, but like a different camera, like an old JVC camcorder, into the woods near the village of where I lived, and trying to create a 4-minute sort of horror film. But because I was acting in it as the one being murdered, it looked more like comedy rather than an actual horror thing. You can probably find it on YouTube somewhere.
No, I will say, and just digging a bit deeper into that conversation, because we mentioned, and I said about cognitive maybe a cognitive test for young kids who may be autistic and may be dyspraxic. We're good for time. We've got about another 5 minutes, I would say.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned about having special things in place, like maybe 30 minutes more for the young people who might find it or need a bit more time to do their tests, or might need a specific assistance. And I think that's great that you've actually touched on things that I've already mentioned. I'm glad that you've mentioned.
I'd say on that, the positive is generally good schools have SENCO, which is Special Educational Needs Coordinator, that sort of thing. So they should be, particularly the ones that have the better Ofsted inspections and so on, they should be more prepared, and they should have access centres, some of them, particularly to help those with autism and so on. So I think on that is good. I think what I've noticed over the years, funding for the arts in schools has been decreasing.
Oh, you're correct, I do know, yes.
And I think music is one of them. So in order to have a really good music education in school, unless you're fortunate to be in a state school, a standard sort of school that happens to have the facilities and the right people to teach it, you have to pay to go private or go to a specialist college, which the sad thing is, people who are struggling with, additional needs do not have all the money and the funding to do that. And so, but when I was at university, I had contacts from the Royal National Institute of Blind People, and they had a specific fund for people who were partially sighted but who wanted to do arts and music. And they gave me a grant so that I could have the equipment that I needed in order to complete my degree after my first year, whilst not having to keep coming back to campus, because the normal procedure is you live for your first year on campus, for the rest of your time you normally go and live in student housing off campus. And so the RNIB, they gave me some funding so I could get a Mac Pro computer with some good audio and music equipment and things like that, so that I could do my projects for university at the home that I was living at, without having to rely coming to campus all the time, which would be good for my visual impairment and things like that. So all that is to say, if you know where to go, funding and help is available, and I encourage you, if you're listening or watching and you're thinking about that, to investigate whether your child or an adult or parent of a child. But it's a challenge, isn't it? More costs keep getting cut, and that sadly includes funding for the creative arts within schools, unless you happen to be in a privileged position to pay for it big time at grammar or private schools and so on.
I think there's been a big change. They do realise that the fastest growing industry is the creative industry. So I hope anyway, in the conversation I've had with some of my colleagues, is that realising that the amount of money that's in the creative and performing arts, I think they will start to support that more in schools, because it's a very fast growing industry, and I think from my understanding that's where a lot of the finances will be in the future. Just to kind of because I know we're going to have to end at some point, and I hate endings, but so for young people that are going through whether they're partially blind or autistic, or parents listen to this, what advice would you give in terms of a young child that might be struggling in school, and maybe how they can, from your experience, support their child, and if it is through the music or through things, how can they? What advice would you give them?
I think one of the first things I'd like to say is, just because you have additional needs does not mean you are somehow less valuable than anyone else.
Of course.
I think that is really, really important. I think I think society, like historically, sometimes looks down on people with additional needs because they rank people according to what they can give back to society and so on. And hopefully there's been improvements with that over the last few years, and hopefully that'll continue. Whether that is how the application process works for jobs in the workplace, whether that is how places are allocated in university and so on. But I just want to say personally, look, from my experience, yes, times were tough sometimes at school. Yes, you did get bullied, you felt like you were the oddball, you were singled out. And the thing is, because my parents said be independent and blend in with everyone else, it felt even worse because I knew I couldn't do that, and it was really hard. So all that is to say, I know how it feels, but I also want to encourage you and say, you can still live life, and you can still enjoy it. You can still maximise your skill, but also your enthusiasm for the creative arts, whether that is music or drama, dancing, or if it's to do with
media or
graphics,
graphics.
Whatever you want to call it, really. Filming, cinematography, photography.
Oh, you go for the whole works now.
There's all kinds of things to think about, and I think just for neurodiversity, I think it's better probably to find one or two things that you may have a passion about, or something that you think you might be able to be good at, and really home in on that and maximise it. And when people see what you can do, they'll come for you, whether that is to give you further training, whether that is experience as a placement at a workplace or career. There are things out there, there are possibilities out there, so just don't give up. Keep going. We do have to learn how to persevere, it's part of human life. But don't let your additional needs define who you are or how
that.
valuable
Yeah.
you perceive yourself to be.
Tim, can I shake that hand of yours? So any people watching on YouTube or on media outlets or listening to this, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Mr. Tim Barnes for having a moment with me and talking about being neurodivergent and the performing arts. And as I said before, if this can help even one young person in their journey as they journey through being neurodivergent, that would be a blessing as well. So thank you very much everyone for watching, and please stay tuned for the rest of my journey over the next 2.5 years, I think, as I complete my PhD, and I hope today's podcast has been helpful. Okay, stay tuned. Color.